Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rolling Stories. I'm your host, Adrian Tan. Now, you've heard the stereotypes HR, the department of paperwork, parties, and the occasional awkward conversation. But I told you, HR is a strategic powerhouse, silently shaping the success of entire organizations. Today, we are breaking down those misconceptions with Emily Draycott-Jones, an HR maverick who's here to show you how to make your own impact and to build a brand that gets noticed. We'll dive deep into the challenges HR faces, from claiming credit for their magic to navigating the ever-evolving world of HR. So buckle up because Emily is about to equip you with the tools and strategy to transform your HR persona from people person to powerful data-driven brand that commands respect at the boardroom table. So I hope you're ready. I'm ready. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me and, set me up there. So thank you, Adrian, for the wonderful introduction. I'm almost blushing.
You're most welcome. So let's jump straight into the first hard-hitting question. Why is HR so bad at claiming credit for its impact?
Well, let's put this really, really simply. If we take credit, we also have to take criticism. And really, as people in the HR organizations, we don't like to be criticized, right? As HR people, we like to focus on employee engagement and happiness and, retention and hiring people and all the good stuff. And the reality is if you want to be accountable for something, you have to take the criticism with the credit. And so sometimes it's easier to avoid taking accountability because then you avoid both the credit and the criticism.
But with that said, we definitely will be forsaking all the good stuff that comes with claiming credit. So how would people be able to balance this? Because ultimately, claiming credit is still important for many of the HR that I speak with and I know of. They barely get a mention for any good things done within the organization. So how do we balance stuff like that?
I think part of it, well, there's a number of factors, right? I think firstly, we have to reframe criticism, right? Criticism is a gift, feedback is a gift. And if you take constructive criticism and feedback in a positive light, like personally now, I find criticism and constructive insights easier than the embarrassing recognition that sometimes we get, right? Because I've reframed what criticism is. I think the second point of this as well is that we have to know or we have to appreciate that part of the joy of the HR function is a lot of what we do is in the background. We
Hmm.
lead through others. We are backstage. We are the lighting. We are the lighting and the organizational design of a Taylor Swift concert, right? Look, I've got my Taylor Swift nails with me today, right? Though it's Taylor Swift getting all the credit. All she's got to do is turn up on stage, very similar to like our business leaders that we are
Hmm.
coaching and mentoring and guiding in the background. We are having those difficult conversations. We're handling exits. We're happily, dealing with issues with people's paperwork or with their payroll. And that's not the stuff that our presidents or our regional leaders stand up on stage and talk about, right?
Yep.
And so a lot of what we do just goes totally unrecognized.
So with all that said, what are the stuff that HR might be leaving at the table by not claiming credit or being bad at claiming credit? Is there even a merit in claiming credit then?
Yeah, there definitely can be. I think personally, for me, it's my own motivation, right? So when I know, and even if I haven't had recognition from anybody else, but when I know I've dealt with a situation really well, it boosts my own confidence, right? When I know that an employee is happier or an employee has stayed with an organization or progressed in their careers because of something directly linked to something that I have done, when I see employee engagement scores improve, or I see fantastic comments about my team or leaders that I have coached and mentored myself, right? That gives me a personal boost and that motivates me on to the next program or the next project. So I guess it's this self-determination and it building your resilience that even
Hmm.
if other people aren't giving you credit, you can take that credit for yourself. You don't need anybody else to give it to you. You need to be resilient and
Mm.
find that credit for yourself.
And the reason why we are talking so much about this aspect is because we would also want to discuss about personal branding,
For
specifically
sure.
for HR professionals, and importantly, how they can leverage personal branding to move beyond the stereotype of just being a people person and to build a strong individual brand. So let's talk about that for a moment. Firstly, help us to understand, why would HR professionals require any form of personal branding?
I think, long are the days gone where HR was the twin set and pearls wearing, administrator sat in the background, right? We are brand ambassadors, we're employee and leadership advocates. There's a number of things that I think the HR community has done to help facilitate this change in the view of our function. I think, our commercial acumen is getting much stronger. If you look at some of the qualifications required, or the technical skills and training that HR are now undertaking, we have the finance for non-financial leaders. We're talking the lingo. We're showing an interest in the business and understanding the wider complexities of organizations. We're more involved now in organizational design, and we are leading the way in terms of, culture, retention, engagement, sustainability. We're now involved in AI, right? And bringing innovation to the table in organizations. So I think, all of this has helped with the functional brand. And now what we need to do as individuals is we need to, jump on board that bandwagon of the
Mm,
organizational and functional changes, right? And as individuals, we now need to build our personal brand as strong,
mm.
commercially savvy organizational design experts rather than the traditional, HR operations managers.
Which I would imagine would be quite a huge challenge for many HR professionals out there, because we were earlier on talking about HR being so bad at claiming credit. And to jump over to this, we are talking about, okay, from leaping across to saying good things about myself on social media to build that personal brand. So for HR professionals who are perhaps still in the silos of thinking about how to build their personal brand, what are some of the baby steps that they should really start thinking about looking at to approach personal branding, especially in today's era, which is very different from how I approached personal branding maybe 5, 10 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, this is a journey I've been on as well. Supposedly, let me think, this is a journey that I've been on for maybe 5, 6 years. And it started when I left a corporate job. I was starting my own consultancy and really kind of starting to explore a portfolio career, and could no longer meet somebody, shake their hand, give them my name, job title, and the company that I work for. And I'll be really honest with you, Adrian, I freaked out. I was like, how do I even introduce myself to a stranger at a networking event if I don't have a job title and a company name to back up who I am and give me some credibility? And so, the baby step, I guess, is identifying what you want your personal brand to be. And let's be honest, I think it's Jeff Bezos that says, your personal brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So do you know what? Baby step number one is find out. And I remember I think I was at an event on personal branding. And one of the suggestions was, well, why don't you just ask people? So I came away from that event and I'm in the Grab on the way home, and I basically spammed my entire WhatsApp list with, hey, I'm going through this realization I don't know what my personal brand is. If you had to use 3 words to describe me, what would they be? Right? And I got all of these words back, and I wrote them in a notebook, in a long list. I looked for themes, right?
Hmm.
So, what were the recurring words or the recurring themes that came up? And then what I did, so I have my list. Now I know what my current
Mm,
personal brand is. And then I spent some time thinking about, well, what would I like my brand to be? Right? Ignoring the list. What do I want my brand to be? when I'm not in the room, when somebody is introducing me, right, or saying, "Oh, I need to introduce you to Emily. She's absolutely awesome." What are the words I want that person to use? So I started to formulate my own list. What do I want my brand to be? And we all know you don't achieve anything without setting a goal. So I guess this was my goal setting. I know my current state. I'm now setting my goal. That then in turn defines the actions that you're going to take. Because now, if I want to be known as authentic and I have the
Mm.
opportunity on social media to be inauthentic or authentic by commenting on a post, I know if I want my personal brand to be authentic, I'm going to be out there. I'm going to give
Yeah.
my opinion. I'm going to be vulnerable, right? I'm
Mm.
going to be compassionate. And it drives your behavior. If you have a goal, right? If you have a
Mhm.
goal to save money for a deposit on your first
Mhm.
HDB, right? When you go to Starbucks or you have, your coffee shop right next door, which one are you going to take if you're trying to save money? Probably you're gonna bring your coffee from home, but if you if you have to spend the money, you're gonna spend, like the $1.50 in the Kopitiam rather than going to Starbucks. Exactly
Right.
the same with your personal branding. If you know what you want to be known for, if you know what you want your personal brand to be, and you have a choice to behave in a certain way, you're
Mm.
going to follow the one that will drive you closer to your goal.
Mm. I really like the part where you go out and solicit for feedback because I think many times people underestimated how helpful other people can be. It's just that for many of us, we just always have this fear of asking for help. But the actual fact is, people are just on standby waiting for you to ask. And if they have something, they will also ask you for help as well. And when they ask you for help, you'll be more than willing to help. So it should work both ways. And I hope, people could really wake up to the realization it's actually quite okay to ask for that help. But I also noted something because you have those feedback and you seem to be quite clear on the direction you're heading towards, in spite of those feedback. What about for people who don't really have a clue on where they are heading? And I somewhat had this from a conversation yesterday night. So I was speaking with this guy. He just left his job in people analytics. And it seems to me he is trying to re-establish his own personal brand, but he has no idea which direction he should head into. So, okay, so you may get all those feedback from people, but if all those feedback would be, you should continue to be in people analytics, which he seemed to be reluctant to continue in, what's the next best step for someone like him to do?
And you know what? I struggle with this as well, right? I more often than not know what I don't want rather than what I do, right? And so really my suggestion for the person you were speaking to yesterday, it would be the process of elimination, right? The world is your oyster. Nothing is wrong with part of your personal brand being opportunistic, right? I am very
Mm,
much like that. I don't have life goals. I don't have a defined career trajectory that I want between now and retirement. I mean, if I had been that type of person over the last, 20 years of my professional career, I would have wasted so many amazing opportunities like relocating to Singapore, getting my permanent
mm,
residency, my kids going to local school, speaking Chinese. You know, if I'd had a plan, I didn't even know that that was an option when I started in my career. I didn't even know what HR was, right? I fell into HR by accident. And so being opportunistic
mm,
is not a problem. That is a good brand to have. You then become the
mm,
person that people call if they can't quite quantify a job description or they can't really or there's ambiguity, right? If you're an opportunist, you're more than likely able to deal with ambiguity. You're more than likely going
mm.
to be adaptable. So turn, right, the fact that you don't have a clear direction into your brand.
Yeah, that sounds definitely doable for many people out there. And I wish people have the ability to see the kind of positioning that I've done over the past decade. I probably have toyed around with, I don't know, eight, nine, even 10 different variation because I have no idea what I want. And sometimes perhaps you just need to do the experiment, Try for 3 months, see if it sticks on the wall. If it sticks, you like it, continue. If it doesn't, go back to the drawing board, start from scratch all over again.
Exactly. And I guess my question for you would be, do you know what you don't want?
I do know what I don't want. Like for instance, when
Much
I
easier,
first
right?
started, yeah, it's so much easier. I know for sure that I hate teaching. So when I started on this self-employment journey, I thought, being a lecturer sounds pretty cool as a byline. I hate it. I dislike it so much. So that is one thing that I know I dislike. And then I can also look at the thing adjacent to it, which, not exactly teaching, but similar, like speaking assignments and all. So that in itself would help me to eliminate so many things away that I'm only left with a shorter list. And then it has to be one of those stuff. It has to be because I have not eliminated them. So that is a great way for us to, of course, look at what we don't like in order to find out what we like. Now,
Yeah,
the other thing that I
defining
like
your
to
goals by elimination. I think we've come up with a theme, defining goals by elimination. And Adrian, I have to say though that, the work that you're doing on this podcast, it's a form of teaching. I hate to tell you if you hate teaching, but
no,
you're
please don't.
but you're giving people insights. You're bringing people to a forum and using your
Mm,
network to spread knowledge, right? And that is what teaching is. So I think you also need to be careful about not being too self-limiting, right? And saying,
mm.
I don't like teaching, I don't like facilitating. Okay, you might not like classroom-based facilitation, but I think you are still teaching and sharing and being generous with your knowledge and your network.
That is quite true. And maybe it also require me to really distill what is the exact element of teaching, as I mentioned, or the definition of how I see teaching that I truly dislike. Maybe it's the standing on stage. Maybe it's the, behind the podium for 2 hours. Maybe it's those attributes that make me dislike what I see as teaching. But to your
Writing
point, yeah,
slides. I hate writing slides.
I hate slides
Thank
too.
God for thank God for, AI, and you can just plug in your bullet points and it creates, training materials for you these days. But yeah, I can see there are bits of the learning experience or the teaching experience that you might not like. And
Mm.
so you're managing to spread knowledge and empower the HR community in a different way that works for you.
Exactly. And for listeners who may be wondering, yes, we will be talking about AI very soon. But before we make that segue, I just want to understand a bit about storytelling because when we have established our personal brand, we know our direction, we know the keywords that we should associate ourselves with, how do we then present it to our audience? Because it just doesn't make sense for me to just go to LinkedIn and say, I like this, I like this, I like this. You have to, for lack of a better word, story tell to showcase your achievement, your impact. Again, for newbies out there, how does one navigate around that? Are there any personal anecdotes or case study where you experimented with storytelling and it somewhat played a key role in how you are able to amplify your personal branding today?
So I think there's two elements to this. And I guess the first one I've already demonstrated. I think the authenticity of sharing your own journey and your own experiences. So mine, coming out of corporate, freaking out that I don't even know how to introduce myself, a networking event, and the journey that I took. Right. So
Mm,
so I think sharing personal journey authentically, right, is a very, very easy way to do it. I also think that it's really important to know the motivations and the passions of the person that you're talking to, right?
mm,
There is no point in me banging on about a legislative part of HR or a way that something has to be delivered
mm,
in our geography here in Asia to my headquarters in the US or Europe and just banging on about things that they can't grasp the concept of. I need to be able to story tell in a way that is going to grab their interest, right? I need to find ways of explaining legislative processes in our region by understanding what they might have been exposed to, right? I do a lot
mm.
of work on legislative processes here,
Yeah.
governance, audit, and so what I've done is I've made sure that the people that I have to explain this to and get approval from, right, in my headquarters, I know some of the experiences that they've had so that I can anchor some of the information that I need to get across and anchor it to experiences that they've had.
Mm,
So I'll give you an example. I was talking yesterday actually to a senior leader based in America, and I'm trying to explain something around our business in Japan, right? A
mm,
particular nuance of culture and process in Japan. Now, I happen to know by checking on LinkedIn that he has experience working in Germany. So he's going to be
mm,
fully aware of when you've got legislative processes, you've got unions to
mm.
engage with, you've got real cultural nuances, you've got just things that resonate in Japan for
Mm,
for me. And so
yep.
by speaking to him and just say, "Hey, look, we need to talk about Japan, but firstly, I want to understand about your experience in Germany because I was really interested in that." So
Mm,
immediately he likes me because I've got him to talk about himself and his experience and the 2 years that he spent in Germany. And then I can anchor and say, "Hey, look, you just perfectly explained the same problems you're experiencing in Japan with the cultural nuances, with the language barriers, right? With the legislative processes, with the needs to go in Germany, it's works councils, in Japan, it's your industrial physicians and all of a sudden he got it. Right.
mm,
So what was an hour long, really, really difficult conversation or could have been, I turned into a half hour. Oh, okay, I get it. And I've built a personal bond with him. And he now
mm,
thinks that I am genuinely interested in the time he spent abroad and the fact that he's,
mm,
like me, moved internationally. So building that relationship and that credibility and getting the story, it's not just about my storytelling. It's
mhm.
about getting the storytelling from your audience and
Right.
finding out their motivations and passions and anchoring onto those motivations and passions.
Mm. I really like how you approach the conversation because it is really so easy for us to jump straight into the data, into the legislation. Let's talk legislation. Let's talk about the legal clauses and all that, and turn that into a 3 4 hour conversation that lead nowhere. But instead, it become more of a personal experience kind of thing, and then you try to bridge them together to find a common ground, and that really help people to understand each other better. Now, having said that, that is under a conversation setting. For many instances of personal branding, we are seeing it more prevalently online. So people will be writing about themselves, writing about other people, other stuff, and to present it into a feed, normally LinkedIn. So under those instances where your personal branding has to be applied under an online setting, how do you take principles or concepts or framework of what you shared and translate it into more of a one-sided download?
Yeah, and again, storytelling, my own authenticity and vulnerabilities, I really struggle with self-promotion. I really, really struggle with self-promotion. The idea of, selling my advisory services when I was running my consultancy, the business development side, I really, really struggle with. And I think this is where you can call upon your network, right? This is where rather than writing your own post, perhaps you could share somebody else's post that you admire, that resonates with you. And rather than just reposting, you repost with your comments, right?
Mm,
And so what I'm doing is I'm authentically sharing the voice of somebody else who I admire, right? And getting their point across and adding my own. So I very often do that. I comment on other people's
mm,
because writing my own post is actually very uncomfortable for me, right? So I think the other thing you can do is tell somebody else's story, right?
mm,
And you did it perfectly earlier, Adrian, right? You said, "Hey, I was sat talking to this person last night," right? That's a perfect LinkedIn post, right? Giving your advice to somebody else and saying, "Hey, I was chatting with somebody last night. They have given me this idea. I'm now exploring, right?
mm,
How do you identify goals when you don't know what your end goal is? Right. One of the ideas is process of elimination, right? This is what I've learned over the last 24 hours. You're authentically sharing knowledge without the
mm.
awkward self promotion. And so I would say that there are a couple of suggestions of how to do it. And it's something I still struggle with. And I really admire people that put themselves out there. There's a few people that I follow, and I just
Mm,
think, like, how do you do that? You know, there's a particular lady I'm thinking of who, posts really credible, vulnerable material about her own life and her
mm,
own experiences. And, the bravery that that takes
mm,
is incredible. And I read some of her posts and I think, oh my goodness, I've been through that. I've experienced that. I have a story to tell about that. But I could never be the one that does these, every 48 hours sharing that piece of vulnerability. So I comment
mm,
on her posts. That's how I do it in a way that's authentic to me. Never do something that is not authentic to you, right?
mm,
One of my values, right, and one of my goals is to be known as being generous and authentic, right? Commenting on somebody else's post and sharing your experiences that resonate is generosity and it is authentic. And so I'm comfortable doing that. So it's finding what's comfortable for you, right?
mm,
Following people that are doing it really well and leading the way and leveraging off that. There's no downside of leveraging other people's skill
mm.
sets, right? That's in itself a great part of the personal branding journey.
Yeah, I like what you said about just talking or reposting and adding your thoughts about other people's posts. The late Adrian Tan, the lawyer, he mentioned something along the line when one of my article on Channel News Asia about LinkedIn went live, and he said the best way to really talk about things on LinkedIn is to talk about other people. That is the best way, and it also help you beat that blank page syndrome, right? Which most
Yep.
writer would have, because you just look at the blinking cursor, you look at a blank page, you do not even know what to type, and you just stare at the blank page for 2 hours and nothing happened. So if you can look at
Oh, come on.
someone else,
In the days of AI, there's never a blank page anymore, right? And I know I'm dying to get to this part of the conversation, right? But I definitely want us to pick up on blank page syndrome, right? Writer's block.
yes, which is our best segue to go into AI. So let's hear your story first. How are you using AI to help you in your work, your personal branding, and how is it assisting you in other aspect of your life?
Okay. I'm not going to talk about the stuff that we're doing from chatbots and HR fundamentals and data analytics and Power BI and all that kind of stuff, right? That's a given. That's part of the technical functionality of our role these days. What I do want to talk about, and thank you for giving me the opportunity, is the incredible opportunity that functions like ChatGPT, right, give us as HR professionals. The ability to change the tone of your emails, right? I used a piece of software. I just did it for 6 months. I used a piece of software that tracked all of my emails, right? And it tracked the terminology that I was using. And, it told me that basically, without necessarily thinking about what I was writing and just tracking my current state, I was coming across as really confident, authoritative. I was coming across as knowledgeable. And I was like, hey, I think I'm a really authentic, generous, caring person, and so I started to write my email in my normal style, paste it, copy it out and paste it into ChatGPT and say,
Mhm.
rewrite this email, right? For focus on authenticity,
Mm,
credibility, friendliness. And all of a sudden, my emails have got please and thank you in them. All of a sudden, my emails have gone, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. Right. And sentences that because I'm so efficient in my email writing
mm,
and just want to get to the point, my true personality was not coming across in my writing style. Right. So I think immediately, everybody who is really struggling with coming across in email differently to how they come across in person, I think use ChatGPT or similar, you know, decide what your personal branding goals are or identify some of your branding goals and just ask GPT to rewrite it for you. Right? That's honestly, that's something that everybody can do for free today.
And it's really easy for anyone to get started. But still, I am seeing people, especially HR professionals, who seem to be quite hesitant to embrace AI for personal branding. I'm not exactly sure why. Each of them seem to have different concern about privacy, about
Yeah.
AI misuse, and of course, the bigger picture, AI is going to take over our job. What would you have to say to those people?
I mean, human resources is always going to have a human touch, right? And, as good as ChatGPT and other, AI simulators are, it's never going to be able to pick up on personality nuances. Right. And I
Mm,
think as HR professionals, part of our role is to be devil's advocate and to, potentially foresee worst case scenarios and use our expertise to think about how somebody is going to take a conversation or how somebody is going to take a change in their role, right? Those
mm,
you're never going to be able to do a redundancy consultation via ChatGPT or a chatbot, right? So I think, what ChatGPT does allow us to do, it allows us to use the right terminology for our audience, right? I quite often will take an email that I want to write, knowing that it's
mm,
going to a CFO, right? Or it's going to somebody that is, heavily analytical. And I
mm,
will ask ChatGPT, "Hey, rewrite my email for the audience of," right?
mm,
A CFO with a slant on, data and analytics. And it will do that, and it will help me write that email in a way that the audience is going to appreciate. Now, what
mm,
then also helps me do is build a personal relationship with that person and have that person more receptive to a dialogue with me because they're not going to think that,
mm,
oh, I'm just speaking to like the woolly, fluffy HR person and she doesn't understand the realities of my job. You know, it helps us build that credibility. Now, I guess a warning sign and or a warning here, and one of the things you do need to make sure you do is that you understand the terminology that you're using, right? So if you're going to rewrite your emails and start talking about EBITDA, right? And you're going to be asking questions about, partnerships within your organization or data points or the lingo that's used in your organization, for goodness sake, understand what it means. Because when that email has opened up a conversation for you, the last thing you want is to be found out as being inauthentic and writing rubbish that you don't understand. Okay. And I think that is sometimes the nervousness, right? But I think, like I said at the beginning, if you can ask ChatGPT to help you write things that are aligned to your brand. So for me, it's
mm,
authenticity, friendliness, generosity, right?
mm,
Which wasn't coming across in my natural writing style, then it's authentic to me. And people aren't then looking at my emails and wondering, where all this information has come from, right? Where have all these words come from? This is not
mm,
terminology that Emily uses when she speaks, right? It's still got to be authentic. I think, that there are challenges around, confidentiality, ChatGPT, the very essence of it is that it learns from what you tell it, right?
mhm,
Just be sensible. Don't put numbers in there, right? If you're wanting to talk about, your KPIs that have moved from X to Y, just put X to Y. Don't put the actual number, right? If you've
mm,
got confidential information, if you're writing an email to somebody that is an invitation to a redundancy consultation, right? For goodness sake, take out that person's name from the email before you ask ChatGPT to rewrite it for you, right? And that's just little ways that I feel more comfortable using ChatGPT. Yeah, I think they would be the little things that made me first hesitant
mhm.
and really, I've definitely broken down that barrier between me and my friend Chat now.
Your friend chat, which I'm going to have a
My friend
chat
Chat.
with later on as well. So I really like what you mentioned about catering to the audience because many times what we try to say, and sometimes it's really tempting for sake of efficiency to just bang out whatever we have and send it over, but only to be caught off guarded because, oh, did you look into this? Do you consider that? And we are just painted into a corner, unable to react. And that would have a detrimental effect to whatever
On your
personal branding you
credibility.
have been trying
Yeah.
to build, as well as your credibility. So, taking that into consideration, and also, of course, not just expecting ChatGPT to put in all the fancy jargons, the beta, etc. You got to know what they mean, because if it's going to grow into a long form conversation, you have to know what to say, how to react. So all this would really be very interesting, and for us to leverage on ChatGPT to help us make it much easier. I know it's possible for you to hammer a nail into the wall with your bare hands, but it's always easier to use a hammer. So why not just use the hammer and then move on to other stuff that you could do without breaking your arm or leg? So moving on to the future of HR branding or personal branding, where do you see the intersection of HR, personal branding, and AI evolving in the next few years? What keeps you? I'm sure you are exploring or experimenting with other stuff as they come along. As I personally tend to have this habit after I really get into ChatGPT as well as other things that it comes with. What are some of the stuff that really gets you excited? What are some of the prediction or insights that you believe this landscape might evolve into?
Yeah, I just think that, it's given us an opportunity to be more creative. I was having a conversation yesterday and we were literally having a conversation about project names, right? And you always end up, right, when you're doing a confidential project, you always end up with, the normal one. Oh, let's go with project colors, right? Like, oh, project blue, project purple, whatever. Or you might go with car names or the name of birds. I've had some awful themes for programs, right, in the past. I asked ChatGPT yesterday to like come up with some creative, innovative, fun project names that I could potentially use for
Hmm.
this next program that I'm working on. Right? It makes HR a little bit more fun. It makes us a little bit more accessible to the cross-functional audiences that we're dealing with. We're not seen as so, stuffy and regimented as previous. So I like that. I think also the opportunity to save time on some of the administrative stuff, right? Asking ChatGPT to, check your data points, right? Asking it to give you information about industry trends, right? Whereas previously we would have had to research that and it would have taken us half an hour. It's something you can ask ChatGPT to do and you get the information in 2 minutes. So what are you going to do with that other half hour, right? And I think you need or the opportunity that we have is to use that half an hour that we've saved on writing presentations, taking meeting minutes. I mean, look at something like Copilot by Microsoft. Absolutely amazing. I now use Copilot to ask it at the end of a meeting to just write the action points. I plug it into an email, send it to everybody. That's just saved me an hour, right? I don't even have to
Hmm.
take notes during a meeting now. I can be fully engaged and present, right? When I'm interviewing a candidate, and then I can just write my interview notes very quickly afterwards, copy and pasting from Copilot. It makes us much more present in the moment and saves us so much time. What are we then gonna use that time for? We should be using
Hmm.
that time to mentor others, right? I have taken 3 new mentees recently. That time was specifically saved that has allowed me to take on new 3 mentees, specifically saved from not writing meeting minutes
Hmm.
and rewriting emails, researching data points and industry trends. And I've specifically kind of made a note, right? The time that I spend, the time that ChatGPT gives me, I am going to give back to my community,
Hmm.
right? And I think before you start saving the time, think about what you want the time for. What are you going to use it for?
Hmm.
Are you going to learn it for self development, doing online courses, building your commercial acumen, spending time with your children, right? Spending time with your parents or with your partner, going out with your friend. What are you going to use that time for? Don't save the time and waste it, would
To
be
doom
the
scroll
best
on
advice.
Instagram.
No, don't go down the TikTok rabbit hole for sure.
I Like that, I had this issue before as I become more and more efficient with all the introduction of my productivity tools. Yes, a lot of times save, but to spend on what? To spend on frivolous stuff, like you said, going down the TikTok rabbit hole, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So to the extent right now, I don't even have TikTok on my phone anymore because I realize I don't have another 45 minutes per day to spare for this. And it's just so meaningless. Well, at least for me, I may sound like a boomer, but to me, at least, it's meaningless because ultimately, if you want to save time, it has to be deployed on something more useful. In your case, mentoring. In my case, it could be something else. And I think with all this coming together, AI is really presenting us with the ability to easily quantify and to for us to adopt all these small little tools to save pockets of time here and there. And all this can add up to be very significant. And with that time, you could spend on developing your personal branding, identifying the things that you dislike, reach out to your contacts to find out what do you think of me, so on. And that may help you to charter your path forward. Before we end this conversation, we're going to jump into our rapid fire question segment, in which I'll be asking Emily 5 questions, short question, and of course, in her casual style, short and sweet answers from her as well. First question, work from home or work from office?
Combination of both.
Okay, second question, in one word, describe your leadership philosophy.
Not having one leadership style, but adapting to the situation.
What is your best HR advice you ever received or given?
Nobody is on the surgery table.
Name one HR trend or innovation that excites you the most.
It would be a combination of the professionalization of the function and it getting the recognition as a strategic partner. And it would have to be how we're using technology, AI, sustainability. There's too many. There's too many. The function's too exciting.
Last question, what is the most common HR myth or misconception you always want to debunk?
I would debunk that HR is purely an administrative service function.
Emily, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Really enjoyed this conversation with you. And with that, I hope all the best in your journey within HR. And for people who may be keen to perhaps learn more about what you do, as well as maybe to even reach out to you to find out more, where can they go to?
Yeah, I'm not on TikTok like yourself. I'm not on Insta like yourself, but I'm definitely on LinkedIn, Emily Draycott-Jones.
Okay, cool. We put that into the show notes. Once again, Emily, thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much, Adrian.